The night my husband and his family tried to humiliate me in front of an entire room full of people was supposed to be the end of my story. At least that was what they believed. They thought they had planned every detail perfectly. They thought I would sit there crying, begging, and accepting whatever future they had decided for me. What none of them realized was that I had already learned the truth nearly 2 weeks earlier. And by the time they pushed those divorce papers across the table, the people who were about to lose everything were not me, it was them. I still remember the silence that filled the room when my father-in-law slid a thick folder toward me during Thanksgiving dinner. It was not the warm silence of a family gathering. It was the heavy kind of silence that makes your stomach tighten because everyone knows something you do not. I looked around the table and immediately felt something was wrong. Several relatives avoided eye contact, a few stared down at their plates. My husband, Ethan, would not even look at me. Instead, he kept staring into his wine glass as if the answer to all his problems was floating inside it. I slowly opened the folder. Inside were divorce papers. Every page had already been prepared. Every date had already been filled in. Someone had spent a lot of time planning this moment. For a few seconds I simply stared at the documents while my heart pounded against my chest. Part of me wanted to stand up and walk away. Another part wanted to throw the papers across the room. Instead, I carefully read every page. My mother had always taught me never to sign anything important until I understood every word. And that lesson suddenly became very valuable. When I finally finished reading, I looked at Ethan. For a brief moment our eyes met. There was guilt in his expression, but there was also something worse, relief. It was the look of a man who was happy someone else was handling a difficult situation for him. Before I said anything, I picked up the pen resting beside the folder and signed every page exactly where they wanted me to. The entire room seemed surprised by how calm I was. What they did not know was that I had spent the previous 11 days preparing for this exact moment. The truth was hidden inside another envelope that belonged to my best friend, Claire, who was sitting a few seats away from me. She had remained quiet throughout the evening, patiently waiting for the right moment. While everyone at the table believed they were watching the final chapter of my life unfold, they were actually walking straight into a disaster of their own making. To understand why that Thanksgiving dinner changed everything, you need to understand the family I married into. I met Ethan Carter when I was 28 years old. He was charming, funny, and seemed incredibly devoted to his family. He called his mother every week and never missed family events. At the time, I thought those qualities made him a wonderful man. Looking back now, I realized they should have been warning signs. After dating for nearly 2 years, Ethan proposed. A few months later, he introduced me to his parents. Their home was enormous, the kind of place that looked more like a private estate than a family residence. Everything was perfectly maintained, from the gardens to the polished floors inside. His mother, Diane, greeted me politely, but there was a coldness behind her smile that I could never quite ignore. His father, Richard, spent most of dinner talking over me whenever I tried to contribute to the conversation. I convinced myself none of it mattered. I was successful, independent, and confident. I had built my own career as an accountant and supported myself for years before meeting Ethan. I believed that if two people truly loved each other, family complications could be worked through over time. I was wrong. Only for months after our wedding, Diane began asking about grandchildren. At first the questions seemed harmless. She would casually mention babies born to family friends or ask when she could expect exciting news. I laughed it off and explained that Ethan and I wanted to enjoy married life before starting a family. She smiled politely, but I noticed the disappointment immediately. As the months passed, those questions became more frequent. Every holiday, every family dinner, and every phone call somehow turned into a discussion about children. Richard frequently talked about family legacy and carrying the family name into future generations. Ethan always told me not to worry about it. He claimed his parents did not mean any harm, but they did. The pressure became impossible to ignore. About a year into our marriage, my doctor diagnosed me with a condition that could make pregnancy more difficult. It was treatable, but it might take longer for us to conceive. I was devastated. I cried all the way home and spent days trying to process the news. When I finally told Ethan, he hugged me and promised we would face everything together. For a while I believed him, then things started changing. His parents became colder. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. I began receiving articles about fertility treatments and lifestyle changes from Diane. Richard started making comments about difficult decisions and wasted time. Sometimes it felt like they were discussing me as if I were not even sitting at the table. The most painful part was Ethan's silence. Every time his parents criticized me, he sat quietly beside me and avoided conflict. Every time they implied I was somehow failing as a wife, he said almost nothing. Little by little, my marriage began to crumble under the weight of secrets I did not yet understand.